I'm doing a little work on this 55-gallon planted aquarium, trimming it up a little bit. You can see how much cleanup. It's been a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks since I've done a cleanup on it. You can see how much I have to take out. And this way the plants don't have to work so hard at keeping sections alive that are really already on the way out. So I just kind of trim them back so the roots can get stronger and the plants can get a little more sturdy. But at any rate, I also added a cave back here. I'm kind of curious to see who's going to claim that cave. Caves are kind of interesting. This is one of the smaller ones. These are from a company called Unique Underwater Galleries. You can see that. And they come in all sizes. I've got a giant one in the red terror tank that he loves. But they're kind of fun because you never know who's going to claim one. And when they start playing around and living around in it, it's kind of cool actually. But at any rate, I want to take up some of the comments that were made in my fatal mistakes video. You can see the thumbnail for it here for the fatal mistakes. Some of you made some comments. I would like to have taken them all up, but I don't have the time for that to read them all and go over all of them. But I thought that a couple of them were interesting, and I can just look at them here and tell you about them. One that jumped out was this one by Murray Wallace. And Murray Wallace says, I think my biggest mistake is when I've gone out to buy a new fish and has been not trusting my instincts about a dirty store tank or poor quality looking fish because of the hunger to have new fish that day. I've now learned to walk away and wait until I see healthy looking stock. That's a good point. I mean, how many times have we sort of impulse bought? And I know in my case, I've impulse bought in the past, and then after I've gotten the fish home, I've then done the research. So it's kind of backwards, right? So you want to do your research on the front end and then make sure that your acquisition is correct, because then I get home and discover that the fish is not compatible with the fish that I have, or requires very different water parameters or something like that. So definitely, I would say, at the risk of killing new fish keepers, because a lot of us get into the hobby on impulse, right? Definitely try to not be an impulse buyer, especially in some of these big box stores where a large number of tanks are being run off of the same filter, because weak or sick looking fish in one tank have probably already spread that virus or bacteria to the other tank, and you're going to take that bacteria home and you're going to go ahead and infect all of your fish, especially if you don't quarantine. I have a quarantine tank right over here that is set up and ready in case I need to hospitalize a fish. I'm actually going to be using it starting tomorrow with some Congo tetras that I'm getting from my friend Josh, a sponsor of the channel, Josh Cunningham over at Cunningham Tropicals. All right, check him out. Check him out, and he's worked out a deal with the viewers where you can get 15% off on fish just by using ben.o.cichlid, and you'll get 15% off on fish purchases. ben.o.10 for 10% off on dry goods, including his own brand of fish food. So check that out. Another comment that was pretty cool, that kind of got my mind going, is this one's by Brian Prather 783. I would add, don't chase numbers, especially like pH. Fast changes are hard on them. Stability is a wonderful thing. I think that's really good, because pH especially can be really stressful to fish. My African cichlids are probably in a little bit lower pH than they should be. My South Americans are probably in a little bit higher pH than they should be. So, but all of them are adapting. They're adapting to these water conditions and having fry and thriving. So better to let the fish adapt and acclimate to your water conditions than to constantly be adding pH up or pH down type products, which are very difficult to really dial in. Now, that being said, sometimes the pH in your tank, especially if you're using things that might buffer like crushed coral aragonite, things like that. Sometimes the pH between water changes, and the longer the water change, the more this is going to be the case, can be different from the pH coming out of your tap. So if you think there might be a situation like that, fill up your tanks a little bit more slowly. Don't just slam water in there as fast as it'll go, but you know, have it take its time with a slow, you know, just a slow fill up of the tank, and that way the fish are able to gradually move with the slight change that might occur in pH, as opposed to some of you out there do a 90% water change and then right from the tap, right? And if a big gap has occurred, let's say you haven't done a water change for whatever reason and you're on vacation or whatever for a month, and your aragonite and your crushed coral have buffered things a bit, then you come in with that, you know, with that 7.0 water or 7.5 going into that 8.2 tank, and you might create a shock. So watch that. That's much harder than having to acclimate slowly. Brian Misway 9324. Brian Misway 9324 says, thanks for mentioning heater controllers. Didn't know something like this existed. I'll have to check these out. Now, controllers are made by various companies. You can pick them up like from Inkbird fairly inexpensively. All they do is they give you a second sensor, right? You have the sensor of the heater, and then you have the sensor of the controller that's in the aquarium. And that controller sensor, like right here, this is a controller right here. And that controller sensor will cut off power to the heater when you've reached the desired temperature. And then if your temperature drops a little bit, it'll then restore power. What that does is prevent the most common problem with heaters, which is that they overheat and you end up with cooked fish. So there are some heaters out there that have built-in safeguards. Apparently some of the Aquarium Co-op heaters do. Some of the new heaters by Cichlids, they have built-in sensors that will detect that kind of malfunction and shut off. So they have like built-in controllers. So check it out. You know, when you buy one, see if it's got that technology built into it. You might still want to use a controller just for a second layer of protection. James Mills 9922 says, great video. I did a water change using my outside faucet to refill the tank, not thinking about the weather outside, and filled it much too cold, and some fish died. Some people don't temperature match. You know, well, it's like the rains in Malawi or whatever. You know, I get it. To each their own. If it's worked for you, more power to you. But what I like to temperature match, I'll go ahead and I use a digital thermometer, so it's very fast, and I like to temperature match with weather conditions, like outside temperatures in the 20s, let's say, or even colder in some parts of the country. Your cold water coming in is very, very cold. So if your hot water heater starts to go down a little bit, or someone in the house is running a dishwasher or a washing machine or something like that, and you run out of hot water, you can all of a sudden start running very cold water into your aquarium, especially if you're doing a large water change. Like in a 300-gallon tank, 1/3 water change is 100 gallons, okay? 1/3 is not that big of a water change in an African cichlid tank. It's 100 gallons. So what that means is my water heater here behind me might, between the use of the dishwasher and the washing machine, what have you, it might start to run low. So what I do is I have to be checking the temperature during the water change, just to make sure that that temperature hasn't shifted. Interestingly enough, what normally happens is the water temperature has gone up a little bit because the hot water heater has had to kind of work its way up to the desired temperature and is running. And so I start off at 79 degrees, and after I run it for 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I check it again, and it's at 81. So I can then adjust the hot down a bit, bring the cold up a little bit. just things to keep in mind. I do like to match temperatures. Joe's Aquatics. Joe's Aquatics says my biggest mistake is stocking too fast and no quarantine. Ended up camellanus worms and lost fish, not to mention what a pain in the butt it was to rid the worms out. Expensive mistake. Well, there you go. You know, even when you have seeded media, like I'll take the sponges, like in the back of my hang-on back filters, I have sponge inserts for my Expertmatic internal filters. So those are seeded and ready to put into an internal filter to start up a tank. So even when I'm adding seeded media, and even when I'm using something like Fritzzyme 7, I'll still stock up the tank relatively slowly. I'll add maybe 4 to 6 fish, and then add another 3 or 4 fish, and then another 5 or 6 fish. Like I'm adding them in stages and letting bacteria kind of keep up with the flow. So you don't want to overstock too fast. Now, certainly when you're starting up a new tank, you don't necessarily quarantine because the new tank is the quarantine. But if you're adding fish to an established tank, please quarantine for at least 30 days. Otherwise, you could end up having to get rid of camellanus worms, or in my case, colomaris, which was a complete disaster, cost me 50% of my stock, and it was because I rushed to quarantine. At any rate, those are some of the fatal mistakes and problems that you folks mentioned to me. I appreciate that in the comments, and I hope that we all learned a little bit from this. Certainly share your comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing, hitting that bell, and joining me on Saturday for the Cichlids and Coffee live stream. 1 hour of fun with a lot of great fish keepers every Saturday at 11 a.m. Central. And to take it one step further, consider becoming a Patreon monthly supporter. Starts for as little as $3 a month and keeps the fish room running. Thank you, my friends. You're the best. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.